There's a quiet moment many people recognize, even if they've never named it. Nothing explodes. No voices are raised. No doors slam. It's subtle. You're standing there, maybe as a kid, a teen, or an adult back at home. Someone else is praised. Someone else is noticed. Someone else's effort gets applause. And you realize no one is seeing you. Not because you failed. Not because you didn't try. But because over time you faded into the background. That realization drops a thought that lingers. Maybe I matter less. This is the inner world of the undervalued sibling. And if this feels familiar, it's not because you're sensitive or dramatic. It's because your nervous system learned an early lesson that shaped how you see yourself, relationships, and your place in them. Undervaluation isn't always caused by cruelty. More often, it grows out of comparison. One child becomes the smart one. Another is the responsible one. Another is the talented one. And someone else quietly becomes the one who'll be fine. Parents rarely say this directly. Harm isn't the goal, but attention goes to urgency. Praise goes to what stands out. Over time, one sibling receives emotional focus, while another receives assumptions. The assumption that you don't need much, that you're strong, that you'll handle things alone. But the brain doesn't grow through assumptions. It grows through recognition. When recognition is missing, the mind fills in the blanks with doubt. Children are wired to make meaning. They don't think my parents are overwhelmed. They think something about me isn't enough. That belief doesn't vanish with age. It evolves. It hides behind adult labels, self-reliance, low expectations, emotional independence. From the outside, the undervalued sibling often looks capable, calm, easygoing, low maintenance. Inside, there's a constant inner negotiation. Don't ask for much. Don't take up space. Don't need what others need. Psychologically, this creates a split. One part becomes overly responsible. Another part stays emotionally hungry, unsure if it's allowed to want more. You learn to shrink your needs not because they're small, but because expressing them once didn't matter. And the brain adjusted. Developmental psychology shows that children with inconsistent emotional validation often become hyper-aware. They read rooms well. They sense moods. They adapt quickly. This isn't chosen empathy. It's survival. You learn to become what the environment requires, not who you are. Over time, self-worth turns conditional. You feel valuable when you're useful, helpful, steady, or quiet. But when you're simply present, offering nothing, there's discomfort. Deep down, a belief still lives there. Love has to be earned. One of the hardest parts of being the undervalued sibling is that nothing terrible happened. There's no single event to point to, no clear rejection, just absence. And absence is harder to grieve than pain. Pain confirms itself. Absence makes you question your reality. You wonder if you're overreacting. You remind yourself others had it worse. You dismiss your own experience before anyone else can. Over time, that self-doubt turns inward. You minimize your wins. Praise feels awkward, even suspicious. Being celebrated doesn't feel natural. Your nervous system learned early that attention was temporary, so it never fully settles when the focus turns to you. Many undervalued siblings also carry a quiet anger, though it rarely shows on the surface. It isn't explosive. It's slow, heavy, and persistent. Anger not only toward caregivers, but toward yourself. Why didn't I speak up? Why didn't I ask for more? Why was I always the one who understood? But children shouldn't have to ask for care. They shouldn't compete for emotional presence. Instead, something else often happens. Emotional outsourcing. The undervalued sibling becomes the listener, the supporter, the place where everyone else unloads. You learn to hold space long before anyone holds it for you. As an adult, this often turns into relationships where you're valued for being dependable, but not always cherished for who you are inside. People bring you their problems. They rely on you. They trust you. But they don't always check in on you. And when they do, you may not know what to say. You learned early that your emotions came second, something to manage quietly, something optional. Psychologists call this emotional invisibility. Not obvious neglect, but subtle emotional absence. It doesn't cause chaos. It slowly erases you. You grow up believing that needing less makes you easier to love, that staying low impact is maturity, that independence equals strength. But independence forced too early isn't true independence. It's adaptation. A child who stops asking for comfort isn't healed. They're coping. Another pattern that forms is comparison-based worth. When one sibling is openly praised, the undervalued sibling becomes alert to ranking. You measure yourself constantly. Am I enough yet? Am I impressive now? Am I finally worth noticing? And even when you succeed, it feels empty. The achievement doesn't land, because what you wanted wasn't applause. It was recognition. To be seen without having to outperform someone else. This is why many undervalued siblings struggle with imposter feelings. Not because they lack ability, but because their sense of worth was never steady. Value became situational. When no one affirms you, the inner voice goes silent. Doubt rushes in. And still, there is strength here. Undervalued siblings often develop deep self-awareness. You think deeply, you reflect, you notice patterns others overlook. You're emotionally perceptive, even if emotionally exhausted. You see nuance. You understand both sides. You hesitate before judging, because you learned early that life is rarely simple. But emotional insight without emotional nourishment leads to burnout. Eventually, there's a reckoning. Usually in adulthood. Usually after giving too much for too long. Usually after realizing that being easy came at a price. That price is connection to yourself. You may feel a quiet grief for the version of you that never got to be loud, never got to be messy, never got to be chosen without explanation. And here's the truth that brings both relief and pain. You weren't overlooked because you lacked value. You were overlooked because the system around you didn't know how to share attention fairly. Families are emotional ecosystems. They don't reward depth. They reward urgency, noise, and crisis. Those who don't create waves are often missed. That doesn't make you lesser. It makes you adapted. Healing for the undervalued sibling doesn't begin with confrontation. It begins with permission. Permission to take up space. Permission to feel without downplaying it. Permission to stop being the one who always understands. Healing starts when you realize your quiet strength was never required. It was a response. Responses can change. And in adulthood, the undervalued sibling often lives with a quiet contradiction. On one side, you're capable. You made it through. You built a life, sometimes in ways that are quietly impressive. On the other side, there's a lingering sense that none of it fully counts unless someone else acknowledges it. That tension shapes how you show up. In relationships, a familiar role often repeats. You become the one who listens more than talks, the one who adapts, the one who notices emotional shifts before anyone else does. People feel safe with you, seen, supported. But being needed isn't the same as being known. Many undervalued siblings unknowingly recreate the emotional climate they grew up in. Not because it felt good, but because it felt familiar. The nervous system gravitates toward what it recognizes, even when it hurts. So you may find yourself in friendships where you give more than you receive. In romantic relationships where your partner's needs are clearer than your own. At work, you're dependable but rarely celebrated. You don't complain. Not because you're unaffected, but because you learned early that managing pain is easier than facing disappointment. Beneath it all is a quiet fear. If I ask for too much, I'll be difficult. If I show hurt, I'll be misunderstood. If I step fully into view, I'll be rejected. So you stay just beneath visibility. Psychologically, this links back to how safety became associated with emotional restraint. When expressing feelings didn't bring connection in childhood, the brain learned to hold them back. That isn't a flaw, it's conditioning. And conditioning can change. One of the hardest lessons for the undervalued sibling is realizing that self-sufficiency doesn't require self-silencing. When someone finally asks what you need, your mind may go blank. Not because there's nothing there, but because you were rarely asked before. So you default to automatic answers. I'm fine. Whatever works. It doesn't matter. But it does matter. It always did. Another common experience is delayed anger. Not explosive rage, but a slow awareness that something essential was missing. This anger often surfaces later, when you notice how easily others ask for help, how naturally they expect support, how confidently they assume their feelings belong. And part of you asks, why wasn't I taught this? The risk is turning that anger inward. Undervalued siblings are especially prone to self-criticism. You second-guess your reactions. You doubt your emotions. You assume you're overanalyzing. But even subtle emotional neglect leaves real imprints. Research shows that children who grow up with low emotional responsiveness often develop strong sensitivity to rejection later on. Not because they're weak, but because their system learned that connection could disappear without warning. So when someone pulls away, forgets you, or chooses something else, it doesn't just hurt, it echoes. You replay conversations, analyze tone, wonder what you did wrong, try to repair something that was never yours to fix. This sense of emotional over-responsibility is learned. As a child, you may have believed that harmony depended on you staying calm, agreeable, easy. That belief doesn't fade with age, it just shifts form. Another layer is identity confusion. When you grow up defined by others' needs instead of seen for who you are, a hard question emerges. Who am I when no one needs me? For many undervalued siblings, quiet moments bring a sense of emptiness, not because you lack depth, but because your focus was always outward. You learn to read the room instead of checking in with yourself. And when life finally slows down, the quiet can feel unsettling. This is often when people begin questioning their direction, their relationships, their sense of purpose. They may feel guilty for wanting more, for wanting to be chosen, for wanting to matter openly, not just quietly. But the desire to matter isn't selfish, it's human. Healing doesn't require blaming parents or rewriting the past in anger. It starts with honest pattern recognition, with understanding that your value was never tied to how much attention you received. Attention isn't a measure of worth, it's a measure of capacity. Emotional capacity varies. Families do what they can with what they have. That doesn't erase the impact, but it explains it. Validation doesn't come from proving what was missing. It comes from finally offering yourself what you didn't receive, and it begins small. Noticing when you minimize your own experience, when you dismiss your feelings before anyone else can, when you assume your needs are inconvenient, then gently questioning those habits. You may need to practice saying things that feel unfamiliar. I do care about this. That didn't feel right. I need time. At first, these words may bring guilt or fear. That doesn't mean they're wrong. It means they're new. Boundaries are especially challenging for the undervalued sibling. Limits can feel like rejection. Saying no can feel like abandonment. But boundaries aren't walls. They're clarity. They teach others how to treat you. More importantly, they teach you that your inner world deserves protection. Another important shift is allowing yourself to be seen without polish. Many undervalued siblings work hard to stay composed, helpful, emotionally steady. Vulnerability feels dangerous because it wasn't consistently met before. But being known requires exposure, not usefulness. Not performance, presence. This doesn't mean oversharing or forcing openness. It means slowly choosing to be seen when you're unsure, when you don't have answers, when you're not holding everything together, and noticing who remains. One of the most freeing realizations is this: you don't need to become louder to matter. You don't need to compete to be chosen. You don't need to earn space by being exceptional. You already belong simply by existing. The quiet grief you carry isn't weakness. It's the mark of unmet attachment needs. And those needs were reasonable. You weren't asking for too much. You were asking for presence. And presence can be learned, even later in life. As you begin to truly recognize yourself, something shifts. You stop waiting to be noticed. You stop shrinking ahead of time. You stop assuming invisibility is your role. You may still be gentle, still thoughtful, still emotionally aware. But now, those qualities belong to you, not to survival. And perhaps the most healing truth of all is this: being overlooked never defined your value. It shaped how you perceived it, and perception can change. You don't need a dramatic rewrite. You just need to stop removing yourself from your own story. Because the undervalued sibling often carries something rare: depth without entitlement, strength without arrogance, awareness without blindness. And when that depth finally turns inward, when you learn to witness yourself with the same care you've given others, something settles. Not loudly, not suddenly, but quietly. Like coming home to a part of yourself that was always there, waiting to be seen.